Good afternoon. I'm the assistant principal, Ryan Stokeling, here at William C. Bryant. We have a privilege and honor to interview Principal Hayes here at William C. Bryant. Principal Hayes, please introduce yourself to the Playmaker podcast here at Williams. And, how did you start your education here at William C. Bryant, your education career?
First off, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Once again, I'm Principal Hayes from Bryant Elementary School. My story and how I came into education is pretty straightforward, but it's also complex. On one end, I went to school. I went to Bloomsburg University. I originally wanted to go there to be a nurse, registered nurse. I thought it was a cool profession, especially for, an urban kid, having scrubs on and, making a lot of money, to be honest with you. That's really why I wanted to be a registered nurse. It wasn't too many guys that had that as a profession when I went there. So, what happened was I had my college algebra course, which is a required course in order to be a registered nurse. And this is not even getting into the deep roots of nursing. And the professor gave out 30 college algebra math problems and for homework. And it had to be done by Wednesday. It was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday course. And I knew right then and there, like this, I wasn't built for that. Like I was really good at math in high school, but the math in college was a little bit different, a little bit more complex. Along with me scheduling, my time, I just didn't see myself being happy in that. So I dropped it, and then I just did a lot of reflecting on, like, what do I want to do? And I still actually didn't know, and I actually ended up having to do an extra semester just taking courses that I really didn't know or need to take. I took a swimming course, things like that. And over the summer, I worked at a summer camp. It was Education Works, and at the time, they was called Beacons. They had them across the city. I actually worked at Germantown High School, and I really loved it. It was like a unique model where, like, you taught throughout the day, science, reading, and math, but then you had, like, other camp opportunities. We took a trip every week, and I just saw my profound impact on the kids. And around that same time, 3 of my little cousins, their fathers was murdered. They was, like, in between the ages of 2 and 4, I saw that great impact I had with them, and I thought to myself, like, well, dang, I'm in school right now. I'm doing this. I could just be a teacher. And on top of that, I'm like, I can make some good money. I look good doing it. I'm a cool guy from where I'm from, and I thought, like, that'll change the mark. Like, I'm a teacher. I get the summers off. I can make some good money. For me at the time, making $45,000 was like golden. And so I'm just like, I'm going to be a teacher. And from there, I was a lifeguard for 6 summers. And so all my work has always been with kids. So I don't even think I came into the profession. I think I am the profession. And it just was a part of who I always was supposed to be. I don't even think that, I just think it's something I'm blessed to do that's just natural for me. And I just think it's all a part of who I am and who I'm going to always be.
So like on that token, like where did you start your education career at? So after, college, did you go straight into the work? I know you said you did some lifeguarding. So like what led you, so that's the start, but what actually, that's the mindset, but what actually led you into the work? Where did you start? What did you learn when you first started the work? And how did you progress to this current role as principalship?
Well, so unique. It's actually full circle. So right now I work as a school district employee. But I originally, my first job was at Mastery, but let me correct that. He's going to have to chop that. So essentially what happened was I actually did student teaching at Lamberton for, my fall semester. Then I graduated. At the time, there was a hiring freeze for teachers at the district. I only wanted to work at the district. I'm like, let me get in the district. I loved working at Lamberton. My teacher that I was working under was Anna Doherty, who ended up eventually working at Mastery one day. I saw her at an All Mastery Day event. But I just loved the opportunity. And I really just wanted to get to work. I didn't have any money. But I knew I had a passion for the kids, and I loved what I was doing. But in that time, I couldn't find a job. I actually, went through, a form of, deep sadness. I won't say depression. Where I felt like, damn, I went to school, spent all this money to go to school, and I can't get a job. All my friends is going on trips. They're going to Cali, et cetera. And I'm just, not doing anything. So I just started working at a daycare, making $10 an hour, to be honest with you, just to keep myself busy because I didn't want to fall into bad habits. I'm from Philly. And there's a lot of bad things that can occur in the city. my mother always told me that idle time is the devil's playground.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to fall into that trap that I saw coming, so I just had to humble myself, and I worked at a daycare. From there, my mom showed me this article, newspaper ad, and it said something about mastery, hiring teachers, and I didn't know anything about mastery other than one of my friends, Sadiq, had gone there.
Yeah.
At one time, he was actually on a website, you know, as a student. I said, let me just go see what it's about. But in my mind at the time, like, charters don't pay no money. Like, I'll do it. I'm a daycare worker right now, teaching ABCs, right? Went to the interview. It was the most intense, thought-provoking interview I ever done. I was, you know, actually interviewed with Brian McLaughlin at Smedley Elementary School, and I still say to this day he's probably one of the most influential leaders I've ever worked under.
Yeah.
And he pushed me, and we didn't never always see eye to eye, but he was the best person I've ever probably worked in education, amongst other people.
Yeah.
And in that interview, I know I'm a little long-winded.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, he pushed me. You know, he made me really think about the profession of education in a total different light, you know, where when I was working as a student teacher, I didn't really think of everything. When I did my interview, I thought I killed it. And he came back like, you know, you didn't have pencils ready. You weren't sharpened. I think you know who Mr. McLaughlin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was like, you know, you didn't have pencils ready. You didn't think about that. And in my mind, I'm like, dang, I bombed this. And I even rethought about who I was as a teacher. And I knew from that point on, he took me on a tour of the school, that I only wanted to work there as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I was able to get some really strong development. I worked under some really good assistant principals, Katie Portella. She pushed me a lot. I had some really good grade partners throughout the years that, you know, I worked and collaborated with that really helped me grow. I have to give credit to them. And once again, Brian McLaughlin, we had a real big shift from the Common Core standards had actually come to light. You know, before it was just really just basic procedural lessons.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we had shifted from, you know, I do, we do, you do, to really facilitating high-level lessons. And I think that's why I blossomed and I flourished. And actually, in that model, I learned a lot about being a leader because Mr. McLaughlin, he led all our planning meetings. And I'm talking about, this is the principle. That's leading planning meetings, leading discourse, being vulnerable about reading and asking questions, coming in my lesson, jumping in, even though sometimes I didn't like it.
It can be uncomfortable.
I respected it, though.
Yeah,
He did it. Even though I thought sometimes, like, Mr. McLaughlin, you coming up with some questions just to say you doing it. But that was a part of what I liked about him.
That he actually modeled it.
Not even that. That was him checking me in that moment to let me know, like, I'm still here.
Yeah.
And you're not just free to do whatever you want. And I respected the way he did it. And so at some point, I had this, you know, this moment where I realized, you know, like, I need to do more. And I also did feel like at a point that I was working under people that weren't as effective as me.
Yeah.
And didn't have a full scope. And I said that the need was for me to be in a bigger capacity.
Absolutely.
You know, I was only impacting maybe 60 kids a year. And I said, why not 600?
Absolutely.
And I started to, you know, really just shift my focus there. I came through the program of Philly Plus, and, you know, fast track program for leaders. Then I did some time at Smedley. I apologize, at McDaniel as a principal fellow, AP. And then I had the opportunity to come here at Bryant. And from there, I've been here for 4 years. It's my 4th year as a principal. And really just trying to impact change. My big term is level up.
Yeah. And that's, so that brings us to our topic of today. The reason why I wanted to have this interview, because I'm really diving into leadership in a diverse context. And with that, I wanted to talk to Principal Hayes today about, in regards to the topic of being a diverse leader while leading a diverse school culture. So we have a diverse leader here in his own way, in his own upbringing, his own walk of life. And now he's leading a diverse group of teachers and staff members, and more importantly, a diverse group of students. We have a high, I wouldn't say a high level, but we have a good amount of English language learners at our school. We have about 1/3 of our population who are SPED students, and they receive specialized services. Oh, I'm sorry, 1/5. I'm sorry, 1/5, not 1/3. So 1/5. So that's even a higher amount of student population. We're in area in West Philly that has one of the highest ACEs scores, which is, of course, that measures the mental health in the area.
Top 10 litter zones in the city.
Top 10 litter zones. So there's so much that's around Bryant Elementary School, even the history of Bryant Elementary School that, you know, still stigmatizes the community today.
Yes.
And is always on the forefront. So there's so much that goes on around the Bryant community, and here you are, you have to lead through that. That being said, so Principal Hayes, first let's just talk about navigating your own diversity. So you're navigating your own diversity when leading a diverse group of students and or staff. So when you found out that you were going to get the principal job here at Bryant, what was your first, you know, mentality? What was your first thought process? What did you say to your family members, being from Philly and, you know, knowing West Philly and this part of West Philly? So what was your first, before you even met the whole staff? I know during the interview panel you meet staff members and whatnot, but before you met the whole staff, what was your like mentality coming into the school?
So because I knew the history of the school and just staff turnover, et cetera, I knew my first mentality was to really get the teachers to feel supported. I knew that was extremely important, was to get that staff buy-in. I also knew that my number one job when I came here was to create structures and systems to ensure that students were safe and there was a space for learning. I knew that I wasn't going to move mountains my first year and get it to that high level of instruction that, you know, I was used to and that I had been grown accustomed to providing students. But I knew I needed to get that staff buy-in, get the parents to understand that the kids will be safe here, and get them to be on my team, and then create systems where kids were safe, were acknowledged, and had an opportunity to learn.
Absolutely. So, and to that point, right, about students having the opportunity to learn, and, you know, one thing that you challenge us to do is to be equity-centered, equity-driven.
Yes.
When you hear those stats of, not even stats, when you're looking at your enrollment and you're noticing.
I'm sorry, I'm working and.
No, go ahead.
During the middle of the day.
No, this is during the middle of the day. We're actually in our cafeteria right now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that this is also during report card conferences, so we have you know, like the students went home earlier as well. But so like giving those students those opportunities, when you look at the data point of 1/5 of the school population is are SPED students. When you know that we have a good amount of students who are English language learners, how do you meet the needs and support them and give them access to an equitable education?
So I'm going to go back to like some of the things I spoke about earlier, and just my own experience. I was a student that actually went to Greenfield Elementary School, and that's not my neighborhood school. It's on 22nd Chestnut. So if anybody knows the Philadelphia area, that's downtown. That's rich city, and I was able to go there because my mom lied about my address. To be 100% honest with you, she had worked at DHS at the time. Sorry, Mom. But she just wanted what was best for me. And, you know, she used the address to get me to go there. And it's a problem that still, you know, plagues our city now because we are a zip code city.
Yeah.
And in first grade, end of first grade, I didn't realize, my dad was late picking me up, and I didn't realize that I lived across the street, according to the address. So I got removed from the building. And my mom, you know, met my teacher, Miss Streeb. Miss Streeb, a great educator. She looped with me. And she returned the summer books to her, and she cried. And Miss Streeb did whatever she did to get me back into that school at the time. My principal was Mr. Scheckman. And I got back in, and during that time, I spent 2 weeks at my neighborhood school, and it was the worst experience I ever felt. I always felt hungry, always felt far away from the teacher for some reason. And it wasn't just because I sat in the back, because I sat in the back in other classrooms. I always felt like it was dark and gloomy, and I just was not happy every single morning. And when I got back into the school, I was so happy, but then it dawned on me, like, the kids that I left back at that school who had no other option, I always thought about them. And so when I think about those kids that you're talking about now, our ELL kids, I always think about what aren't they getting, right? Yeah. And so first thing I'm going to lead with is that I always think about their needs first. I don't think about the staff at that point. I don't think about myself. I think about what is it that they need, and I start there. I always start with what are the major needs for them, and then I start to plan from there. So when we think about ELL learners, you know, I think about what are the offices I need to collaborate with. We have an ELL teacher that comes in, I believe, 3 times a week and works with our students. But then in some cases, we actually can't service the child. So I work with my specum who works with 440. We have a point of contact for our network. I'm an acceleration network. And so, for instance, I'll give an example. On Saturday, I went to go pray at the masjid, and I actually saw a parent, a dad. He was like, hey, I remember you are the principal at the school. My kids, you know, they're doing really good at 46 and Walnut. And I'm like, really? I'm like, what's the name of the school? Told me the name of the school, and he was like, I really appreciate y'all helping us get them to the school where they're going to get the most support because they're from Sudan. And we just really couldn't service them. And, you know, just going back to leadership, I work under Sean Conley, who's my assistant superintendent, and his #1 mission is providing access to all learners.
Absolutely.
His big push is for Tier 1 access, which is the grade level standard, but it's also about beyond that. Like in some cases, we have to do what's best for the kids. But his #1 thing is like, are we meeting the basic expectations of Tier 1? And because I have that mindset, and I'm, you know, not only being coached around it and evaluated on it, I always keep that in the forefront of my mind of, are we providing access?
Yeah. So, and to that point of like this access and are we providing access, you know, when you look at, you know, we can bring up, you know, A.S. Conley, even your push on providing access. It's also beyond, you know, the classrooms, right? Like providing access to the classrooms. And we also know that, you know, our racial ethnicity and all that are social constructs that has been established since the founding of America. You know, when we do like census and all that, like, is this always to categorize people based upon their race and their social economic status, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you provide access, knowing that, you know, here we have about 98% of our students that are African American, and or black and brown students, let's just say that.
Or low income.
Or low income.
Free and reduced lunch.
And yeah, we had to provide free and reduced lunch. So how do you provide them access even outside to just like the world and like just great knowledge of what society has to offer outside of the 4 walls of their classroom?
Well, first off, you got to always, again, ground yourself in what are the needs. I always go to that, and I always think about my experience as a student and what I would want for my own kids. I'm a father of 2, and so, you know, I always try to think about, you know, what I want this for my kids. So I always, you know, try to create opportunities for exposure. Again, I always think about my childhood and when I was a student. My teacher, Miss Matthews, she always talked about exposure, like getting kids to have exposure to different things. So when I think about that, I always think about what are the opportunities to give students exposure beyond, you know, their educational program. But let's start with the educational program. Is the things that they're reading culturally relevant, right? Is the teacher, again, providing access to those culturally relevant lessons, right? When you're thinking about math, right, historically our students right now are struggling in math, right? There's no surprise that nationwide we are having a math problem, right? And so I always think, like, you know, how am I supporting teachers? How am I supporting my leaders to support teachers in making lessons more engaging and culturally relevant? So if you're asking a word problem, what's the problem with asking, you know, making it relevant to their life? When we talking about these texts, you know, are we still using texts that are based heavily in rural areas where they have no, you know, content knowledge of it or any background knowledge or schema? How are we making it relevant? And if we are using those type of texts, are we providing access? How are we scaffolding the lesson where a student has access to that lesson? But then when I think beyond that, like, you know, what are the opportunities for mentorship for our students? You know, I'm really big on the community. Right? How can I engage the community? What are the great things that's happening in the community? We are on 60th and Cedar, so we have the 60th Street Business Group, right? There's a lot of good things that are happening here, right? And so I always try to think, like, you know, I have a friend, he comes here and does the Ballers of Bryant. and he does mentorship with them. Last year we had the Black Excellence Career Fair, where we had over 15, entrepreneurs and regular workers, just, not even regular, they pretty elite people, come here and give access to students and show them, like, hey, these are the type of jobs you could do.
Absolutely.
Even when we're thinking about clubs, like, hey, let's make clubs that are aligned to the things that they're interested in, and how can we create a path for them to think about their own life and doing it on a serious level. And then even when I think about hiring, I think deeply about the type of people I'm hiring. And are these the type of people that are relatable to them?
Mm-hmm.
Are these the type of people that are going to give them access and help push them past their own community, and teach them how to take care of their community? Gentrification is a big thing. And my new thing, and what I'm teaching kids, is we need to gentrify from within. We shouldn't wait, to be pushed out our communities. We need to beautify our communities. And like I've told you before, like, I come from an area where it's like, it's get out the hood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to teach people to uplift the hood. Like, how can we make our community look great, where we don't have to, like, get put out because the taxes have been raised and the property value exceeds our means.
So, I mean, I love all the, like, the access part of, like, the different avenues that you're bringing access into the building and exposure to the building, whether that's having entrepreneurs come in and, talk to our students during career day, or having, like, mentorship programs, or just the actual staffing that you provide when you're going through, like, the hiring process. Now, you mentioned your own upbringing in education, whether that's your childhood to college and then your early career, and of course to where you are now. How have you navigated your own diverse makeup, like being a young, if you don't, like, you're under 35 at least, I don't want to say your age if you don't want to, but you're under 35, you're African-American male in a predominantly female-driven, career path.
Absolutely.
So you're an African-American male in this environment. How are you navigating your own, whether it be your religion, bringing in your makeup, right? Your religion makeup, your religious makeup, your own just mentality of, like, how you was raised by your parents and how you even parent now, and what you see with our parents in a everyday interaction. Like, how do you bring in your makeup while leading our staff? Like, what are some things that you have to tell yourself, like, going into this, hey, Bahir, this isn't this or that, I need to lead in this way? So
it's definitely a journey. It's been a journey. It's still a journey. I'm still trying to find that. Again, I like to share data. Black males only make up, at the time, I think it was 2% of the entire teaching population in America. I think that number might have grown to 4%. So when you think about this nation, right, 4% of our teaching population is black males, right? And that number decreases when you start talking about black male leaders, right? So that's a tough spot because you're in a minority, right? And you have to be very, careful about how you navigate that. At Mastery, I was in a white-centered, organization that really did try to push diversity, whether they partner with the Black Male Educators Convening Fellowship. They were one of the first organizations that really, pushed cultural context conversations. But it still was predominantly white. And like you said, it's female-centered predominantly. And so I've had to always navigate that. I think where I'm learning to be me is reminding myself that it's okay to be me. It's okay to be a man. It's definitely okay to be black. And it's definitely okay to be the guy that came from the hood and made it here, because that's why I'm here. I'm here for those students who were just like me, if not had it harder than me. I'm here to be that example for them. I'm here to show them that there's a life outside of your neighborhood, and that if you work hard and you stay committed to the things you're doing, you could be better than me, because I wasn't the greatest student. I just was the hardest working student, I believe. And so I think also keeping myself around people that remind me that it's okay to be me, and that will give me real feedback about how to navigate, having strong mentors, and really focusing on that work. I have had the privilege of honestly working under a black male, and Sean Conley over these last, I think this is our 3rd year together. And he's been a really good resource to me, you know, just working with me around, like, you know, how to work, how to do the work, how to just be okay with being me. And, you know, it's always just, as long as you remain a professional and doing what's right by kids, you'll be fine. Yeah. And I think, you know, grounding myself in that, and then grounding myself in, like, hey, I'm here for these kids, no matter what. Teacher shortage, no teachers, no admin, 180 kids, 800 kids. I signed up to do what's best for these kids, and I believe my best is what's best for them. And if I'm not at my best and I don't believe that what I'm doing is right, nothing's gonna go right. So I always have to, again, remember my why I'm here, and being comfortable with myself, but also being mindful of others. Yeah. And I'm actually going to elaborate on that a little bit more. This is something I actually told you last year, actually in this very cafeteria during PD, that everybody's not Ryan Stokeling. Yep. And I had to realize everybody's not Bahir Hayes. So the way that I did things was not always something somebody else could do. And I'm going to say this, I don't know how people are going to take this. I felt like when I became a really good teacher, and this is a term that I haven't shared with anybody, it became like a reverse privilege, right? So you only got control of the kids because you're a black man. Yeah. They only listen to you because you're a black man. They only follow your directions because you a black man, which is crazy, because it's like that reverse privilege, like, well, you don't see all these hours I'm shooting in the gym. Yeah. I'm staying here until 7 o'clock at night. This is a teacher. I'm playing until 7 o'clock at night. I'm calling parents every single day. I meet with parents every single day. I'm constantly reflecting on my own practice, and how I can become better. And even now, as a principal, I'm here till 7 o'clock at night. And I had to realize that, though, a white female teacher, 22, coming out of college, may not have, you know, the natural proclivity to build that relationship, because it's something new. It's not her culture, right? And I had to be mindful of that and realize that I had to equip them with the tools, but also be aware of who they are as people, right? Who are you? What do you like? And let's leverage that, right? One of my best teachers I've probably ever coached, Ms. Arbikoff, white teacher, fresh out of college. She went to Bloomsburg, 22 or 23 when she started. She says to me this day, like, you know, you said I wasn't building relationships. And I was like, you know, we just had this conversation. I'm like, I didn't think that you weren't. I didn't think that you were seeing it from their perspective. Yeah. And even her telling me that also still was a aha moment for me, because she was building relationships in the way that she knew how to, right? And so the big thing is also really getting to know people, right? And understanding their educational journey. The first question I always ask all my candidates, and if you're a person that's watching this and you're going to interview soon, you got the first question already. My first question I always ask is, tell me about yourself, your background, and your educational journey that led you here. I always remember that question and what you said, because then I'm able to support you and how to support our students. And so that's something that I always had to remember, is that, you know, like, everybody's not me. Everybody can't do what I can do, but everybody has something that's really great about them that can be leveraged, and I can give them a piece of me. Yeah.
And what I'm hearing is, like, so even when you're navigating your own diversity, you tap into your staff members' diversity to use that as leverage for their students and for our school. Few more questions, because we got to go. I definitely want to ask, in regards to, like, yesterday you empowered my colleague AP Williams to lead our PD, one of our first PD. She's our equity champion. One of our equity champions.
You're an equity champion too.
Yeah, so we like to.
And just real quick, I want to give it up for AP Stokeling. Sorry to interject. I got to be real. He has done a lot of, hard work. It's a process. But he's coming from, corporate to teaching, straight to a climate manager role to AP. And he is also an equity champion for our students as well. And it goes back to, again, putting yourself around people that want to do the work. And I never knew Mr. Stokeling from anywhere. I heard about him. We was actually at the same school at different times. So I was there as a teacher for 1 year, and then he came in right behind me. And at the time, I was looking for a climate manager, and I heard great things about this man. I met him one time because they continued the work I did, the basketball team. And right away, I knew that, for one, AP Stokeling was eager to do this work and wanted to make a difference. But I also knew he had ambitious goals, and he was willing to do the work to get to those goals. He didn't want a handout. I think it just kind of goes back to those moments of giving other people a chance. I'm going to just ask you this in a moment. What did I say you had to do to pay me back?
Pay it forward to the next person.
The next black man.
The next black man, yeah. Not the next person, the next black man. Like when I see somebody else who has potential and just need an opportunity, to pay it forward to them.
I'm really big on giving opportunities to people, black women, black men, who oftentimes are overlooked. And I think that it's important that when you have an opportunity and you're in a seat to help and provide an opportunity for somebody, that's the best thing you can do, is help somebody else and pick them up. We need more people that come from our communities, that are educated, that may get overlooked because other people may not understand them. And as long as I'm in this seat, I'm going to do whatever I can to provide opportunities for minorities to be in leadership. And I work with everybody. Some of my best workers are white, and I appreciate them, and they do some of the best work. And I'm big on promoting them as well. But I really think it's important that we start really creating a pipeline and a pathway for black male leaders. And in fact, I actually recommended AP Stokeling for the Pathway to Leadership program that he's in right now. And it's actually a program that the district initiated, which is an excellent program. And it goes to show that their work that they're trying to do in promoting black male leaders, Asian leaders, and Hispanic male leaders. Because we have a small percentage of black male leaders, and they are actually pretty much covering his entire tuition at Temple University. You could either go to Temple or UPenn. He chose to go to Temple. I thought he should have went to UPenn and got that Ivy League scholarship. And they are really invested in his leadership. And right now he is working to really go down that path of being a principal, maybe doing 2 or 3 years as an AP, and then becoming a principal, taking on his own building. Because it's not about just getting a job, because he can become a principal tomorrow if he wants to. It's about being in the job and being good at it, because it's about the kids. And I just wanted to really speak to that. I know that was a sidebar, but it really meant something to me to say that. I think it's really important that other people, other men out there, other women out there, if you have an opportunity to pull somebody up, pull them up. There's a lot of space for all of us to lead. Even my own assistant superintendent, just him promoting me to really be great and telling me find people that could be leaders. One of the biggest things that he does is builds leaders from within. And I learned that from him. And he's also one of the strongest leaders I've ever worked under. And I've learned a lot from. And I just wanted to share that, and just also share that, AP Stokeling is a direct reflection and a result of one of my biggest visions, again, which is level up.
And I appreciate that, because a lot of times, we're probably, the youngest black male principal and assistant principal in the school district. And I believe there's, 300 schools?
Yeah.
K-8 and, 9 to 12 schools in the district. And just to be in this position and just having this opportunity, I can't, really – it makes you really want to run through the wall every day and work for, a great leader and the vision that he sets for the school. And then, of course, the vision that the AS has for our network. I do want to ask this one question before we go.
I apologize.
Oh, no, I love that. This is just authentic conversation,
Yeah, for sure. And we had these type talks all the time. So it's a little bit more structured, but we always are reflecting on, how do we provide access? Are we doing what's best for kids? And sometimes we sit on the phone and really feel like, dang, we're not doing what's best. And that's what drives us, is making sure that we're giving these kids an opportunity. I come from the inner city. Stokeling was in the inner city and then spent a lot of times in the suburbs. And last year we had a very long, passionate conversation about his experience and my experience.
Yeah.
His senior year, my senior year, right? And I went to a magnet school. Don't get it twisted. But his school felt like a Disney experience. Like they had senior prom, senior cut day. They went to the beach. And I just like, I also always try to pull on Mr. Stokeling, like, what did y'all do? Because if y'all did it, we doing it. You know, and I think it's good to have like a person that like, you know, does come from a suburban area, right? And even though we both had both our parents, and I feel like we are pretty privileged, we had two totally different outlooks on life.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's another thing that's important, that just because we both black don't mean we just the same. We have two totally different lives that we lived, right? And we both lived a privileged life. Technically, no. Considering the whole scope of America, but in our neighborhoods and as black people, we were privileged, right? But we still had two totally different lifestyles.
And I mean, and that actually leads us to like what I was going to bring about, you know, just we've had these PDs on equity,
yes,
you know, actually naming, hey, that's a racist statement, or you have a fixed mindset, or you have a savior. That is a savior complex. So we have
black
these
elitists,
you know, like, hey, I'm coming from the suburbs, and this is what blackness should look like. You know, and just really looking low on your other counterparts. So we have these PDs, and yesterday we actually, AP Williams, you pushed AP Williams to lead a secular stance PD because we're servicing students of all backgrounds. Talk about like what comes to mind when you want to have these professional developments for your staff to say like, hey, I want to have an equity or race-based conversation PD with my staff. We had one in this cafeteria last year, which was very intense, and we actually had to pause during one of the conversation points and name, hey, we're actually looking at a group of white teachers sitting next to each other, doing the PD on, you know, equity and race, and a group of, you know, African-American teachers sitting with each other. We just segregated our own selves, even though we're in a integrated school. So, like, what is your mentality when you're approaching these professional developments, whether it's on taking a secular stance? What does that mean? And, you know, how do we empower our staff members to, once again, live in their own diversity, but understand the students that we're serving? And we have to develop that.
What you think I'm thinking when I decide to have these PDs? What do you think is the number one reason?
Oh, the students' needs.
Period. It goes back to exactly what I said. I always think about what is the needs for the kids, right? And again, with so many diverse staff members, right? Even me and you both being black men, having two totally different vantage points on things, right?
Yeah.
The need is to center ourselves in the work that we're doing, right? So what you referenced was our equity dictionary. You still rolling? Okay. Was our equity dictionary, right? I felt it was important that we created an equity dictionary with terms that are familiar terms, that are used across America. But what does it mean to us? What does it truly mean to have a fixed mindset? What does it mean to have a growth mindset? What does it mean to be an actual racist? What does it mean? What is an implicit bias? What does it mean to have what is a microaggression?
Yeah.
What is a black elitist? Because oftentimes what you find in these schools is that sometimes the black educators can be more detrimental. Because they don't feel like they have to do the work because they did have that experience, right? But again, we just spoke about how me and your experience is two totally different experiences. So how are we actually giving access to that kid? And I felt like it was very necessary that we really named these things as a staff, because we also, for one, we need to really just name it and have a common language we could use. We also need to be able to put a name on what it is when we see it. Yeah. So that people were comfortable to have that conversation. I felt like in order to have true growth, you have to have buy-in. You have to have a shared vision and shared accountability. I think that it was necessary for all my staff members to understand that we all had some work to do with this. I think it was important that for my black teachers to hear, like, hey, it's not just a white person's PD. Yeah. It's PD for you, too. Yeah. There's a thing called black elitists, right? And I also wanted my white teachers to feel comfortable to have these conversations and engage and really push their mindset. So I think, it's always impactful for us to really reflect on those things so that we can name it when we see it, so that we can grow from it. And so when you talk about that equity dictionary, what we did was we defined these things, and then the teachers had to create scenarios,
Yep.
right? Based off of these definitions. They had to come up with an example of what it meant to have an implicit bias and a non-example, and then they had to act the scenarios out. And I actually probably need to make that real. I still have them. But I always think about the kids. When you even think about taking a secular stance, like, we got a diverse group of students here. We have Israelites, Muslims, Christians, Jewish students, right? And when you talk about having a secular stance, you don't never want to isolate a student, right? So again, it always goes back to students for me. Are we actually implementing a practice that is excluding a student, right? And when you start talking about holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Halloween, you could be perpetuating a mainstream belief on a student that doesn't have that belief, right? And so if we're not going to acknowledge every single one and really just teach a lesson, a nonfiction lesson on it, we should really be leaving it alone. And for me, that's pretty much my viewpoint on, anytime there's a need to have an equity conversation, because we really need to make sure that we're being reflective about the work we're doing and how we provide that support to students and giving access to all students.
So when I should have probably asked this question in the beginning, but since we're about to wrap up, I think it's a good reflection question on the interview and the work that we do. What does diversity mean to you? And has it changed? Has it changed from, the beginning of your education career, or when you first understood that word, to now when you're sitting in a leadership role and you're leading in this community with this staff and leading this group of students? What does diversity mean to you, and has it changed since you've been a principal?
Well, it has changed. Again, just me understanding that me and you have two totally different experiences, right? That's me understanding that diversity goes beyond color and race. For me, diversity is understanding that everyone has a unique trait about themselves that when you put them all together creates a unique combination of people and a unique combination of individuals that make a team's identity.
Wow.
So honestly, I never thought about that question. That was the best answer I can give right now. But for me, that's what diversity means. That the different things that people bring then define that team. And then making sure that everybody's unique thing about them is able to shine and come through in the identity of the team.
Absolutely. And our last question, and this is like, we've probably been rolling for 30, 40 minutes, and we haven't even talked about like the operations of school. We haven't talked about literally the instruction of school. We dabbled in instruction when we talked about our ELL students and our SPED students, and hiring, but we really didn't go deep in in our instruction. So this is how how broad education can be. We can really talk about education for days, or hours, days, and weeks. I.e., why we should probably do a series. But before we end, we have a leader here of a school. What is your prediction, or what do you see in the future of urban education when you're thinking about coming back from this pandemic that we still are seeing the ramifications from? So we're coming back from a pandemic where we're leading now, and like you said, we have around the nation a mathematical problem with students in their instruction. So what do you see, and I mean, once again, we talked about poverty and mental health in urban areas. So what do you see, where do you see the future of urban education, and where do you see the future of diversity and leadership?
I think that after the pandemic, if not now, later, you're going to have to see some fundamental changes in order for things to get back to normal. This pandemic impacted us in a major way. You saw the mental health. You saw, the poverty. You saw the trauma. I feel like what I believe will happen in education is that we'll see educational reform to some degree. And we've already seen some of that with some of the COVID funds that we were able to get, you know, just me being able to have 2 assistant principals, you know, that was, you know, recognizing the need that we needed more and more resources. But I do think at some point there will be a fundamental change. I think that some of those changes are already in place and people are already being reflective. I think that the district is already taking those steps to make sure that we have more diverse leaders. Them not just saying black leaders, but Asian leaders, Hispanic leaders. I think that they recognize that there's a need to have people that can relate to the community that they're, you know, leading and supporting. And so I do believe that we will see more diversity in leadership. I think we will begin to see more black female leaders. And I do think that, you know, you might even start seeing different ages of leaders. You know, you might see some really young leaders, you might see some middle-aged leaders, and some older leaders. I think that we're going to see a lot of diversity because, you know, one is not better than any other. And I've learned that. I've learned a lot from some of the most veteran principals. And when I first came in, I might have thought young is the way to go because, you know, mastery tends to hire a lot of younger leaders. But then I've learned over time that, like, you know, experience is really important, and so is youth. And so how do we blend that and make, you know, how do we create opportunities where, like, people are staying in a profession and there's retention, where you have experience, but you also have some fresh minds at the table. Yeah. So I do think we'll see some diversity with experience and youth and just different backgrounds.
There you have it, everyone. I appreciate Principal Hayes for doing this interview today. I appreciate, you know, Playmaker Podcast or Playmaker Network coming to our school today and really capturing
shout out to Playmaker.
All of the moments that we have and, you know, meeting our community, our families, our students, our staff members. And, you know, I appreciate our class that we're doing this for. So have a great day, and I appreciate you, Principal Hayes.
Absolutely.
Visit our website at theplaymakerpodcast.com and subscribe on Apple Podcast and Spotify.